Check. 1, 2. Check.
We are live. I'm here with Hey Globbies, name of Fung. You've seen him on
Hi. Hello.
you've seen him on let's see, what other channels you been on? You've been on freaking McTunes, right? And
Yes, I
um
have.
and then you were on oh shoot, the other guy.
Uh, fight. Fight the
Fight the
flat Earth.
Flat Earth. Yeah, you've been on them all.
Yes, I did.
That's pretty
Actually,
awesome.
I didn't start using Facebook not until 2 months ago. Can you believe it?
Really?
And yes, I created this account solely to discuss the shape of the Earth.
Oh,
And yes,
wow.
I'm not I'm not very into the social media thing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's bad for it's not a good thing. Um
Yes, suck up
so
all your time. But anyways, yeah.
yeah, I'm curious about you and your story and how you came to be a flat earther and like how you got on like McToon's channel and stuff like that. So I don't know if they give you opportunity to share that, but I'm interested in that. Can you tell us the story?
Okay. Well, the flat Earth movement, if you will, it all started off in around mid 2015.
Yeah.
So yeah, so at that time, I was browsing on YouTube, and then I came across a uh, flat Earth video called the Flat Earth Clues. I believe it's made by what's this guy's name? Mark Sargent. Yes.
Oh, hey,
Quite
I got
quite
an interesting
good.
story with that. You know, I live on Whidbey Island and Mark Sargent's from here.
Okay. Oh, great. So yeah, so I looked at it, and then at first I would just, like everybody else, I just laugh at it, because how can it be? How cannot the Earth not be a globe? Because we have been told all our lives, right?
Mhm.
And then and then I started to try to debunk it. Oh, I'm sorry, so sorry. I've got a phone call. Sorry.
It's all good.
Why? I'm sorry.
It's all good.
Yes. So I try to I try to debunk it. So sorry. Yes. And then the more I learn, the more I'm convinced the Earth is not actually round, because here's the thing. There are a lot of arguments. I'm sure everybody have heard about it from both sides, but it is the timeline of how the people who come to believe the Earth is a globe that worries me at that time, because there are a lot of coincidence, and then the further down you look, you find out that a lot of the things um, they said it is proven is actually a supposition. It's actually a theory. Okay, everyone just go with it first, and then another theory built on this theory, which has never been proven. Also,
Mhm.
so that's why the story, if you will, stack up a layer on top of a
Mhm.
layer. Eventually, it becomes too big. It cannot fall, because everybody just accepted it. So
Mhm.
to be honest, apart from the proofs or the arguments, it is the timeline which convinced me that the Earth is flat.
And what do you mean by the timeline? The timeline of like this the theories or the progress of
The theory,
science or
the
whatever?
theory, the theory of the Earth being a sphere, because everybody was told everybody knew the Earth is a globe like 2,000 years ago when Aristotle's see the ships going over the horizons, right? This
Mm-hmm.
is this is how it all started.
Right.
But now with the aid of cameras and binoculars, people can easily see that it is not the case. Ship doesn't go over horizons. You can always bring it back up if the zoom of your camera is good enough and the air condition is clear enough. You can always bring back the ship. It is not going over anything.
Mm-hmm.
This is one thing, and this is the thing that everybody comes to mind because it's being told so many times.
Mm-hmm.
People treat it as a fact, but it is not.
All right. Well, let's start at the beginning. So you watched the Mark Sargent thing, yeah?
Yes,
And then you said you went out and you tried to debunk it or whatever, yeah?
yes.
And then you just couldn't. So, well, I don't know how much of like this is gonna, um, make sense. But when we're talking about, because you said in your thing that you start off with this, let's say, the whole scientific endeavor starts off with some presuppositions, right? Is that kind of what you said?
Yes.
So what would be like a base level in your words, like a presupposition?
Well, the thing is, people first assume that the Earth is a sphere, and then they try to find proofs
Mm-hmm.
to prove his supposition. This is how it goes. Every argument for the globe starts with if the Earth is a sphere,
Mm-hmm.
something will happen. So and so will happen. Oh, so and so will happen. So the Earth must be a sphere.
Right.
This is the logic for for virtually every proof of for the globe. But the thing
But
is,
like if you were going to do, isn't that how we do everything though? Like if you're gonna try to go out and do something to experiment on the flat Earth, wouldn't you do the same thing?
no, actually, it isn't. If we
Oh.
are talking about science or using the scientific method, you're actually you're actually finding the cause of some of your phenomenon. It's establishing a cause and effect relationship, not just suppose not just suppose this if this is true and this will happen. This is not science how science work, because the thing is there are a lot of there are a lot of cause causing the same phenomenon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say the shape of the Earth. Um, if the Earth is a sphere, you can see the stars seem to roll behind the curvature of the Earth as you move further.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the globe proof. But the same thing can also happen on a flat Earth
Yeah, yeah. Sure.
because of perspective. So this is the thing. You have to prove your supposition first
So let's
before
go with
making
that.
any other hypothesis of it.
Yeah, let's start with that. Okay, so we have something we're looking at, right? We look up at the sky and we see that the stars are rotating around, right? And then
Yes.
and then and then you want to try to figure out, okay, well, what's the cause of that? Well, then you make some sort of hypothesis, right? And then you test it, right?
Yeah. In
So,
in ten. Yes. Sorry. Go on. Sorry.
well, I mean, and then let's say, but what you're going to run into, and this is something that you'll hear sometimes on the internet, is the problem of underdetermination. Have you heard this?
Under determination.
Yeah. So this is something just like that I've been trying to implement in my mind. I'm an electrician, so I kind of run into stuff like this every once in a while where there's a problem, like with the wiring or
Mm,
whatever, and then I try to
mm,
figure out what's the cause. So, but it's very easy to to come up with a hypothesis to explain it. It's very easy to say, well, this it could work in this situation, or in this situation, or in this situation, or in this situation. Really, the only reliable way to say that one of the hypotheses is more accurate is that if it makes testable predictions, right?
Mm. Um, in
Because it's very
in
easy to say,
terms of
okay, the stars are moving in the sky. Well, let's say the hypothesis is, well, that's because the Earth is round and it's rotating. Or there's another hypothesis, the the Earth is flat and they're spinning above us and then they're going away because of a perspective. Or the Earth, the dome, there's a dome and it's a TV screen. Or I'm just a brain in a vat and so it's just in the matrix. So you can come up with a million different ways to explain it. That's the problem of underdetermination. Is there's something we're looking at, but there's a million billion ways to explain it. So how do we filter those out and find the best one?
exactly this is actually my point. You can sometimes you think let's say the shape of the Earth. There are a lot of phenomenon around us in nature that can fit this rhetoric or this belief.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there is because how else are you going to perpetuate that this belief? I don't want to say lie, but this belief, if a lot of things doesn't add up, people will people will start questioning it immediately. Of course, there are a lot of things that will fit this belief, right? But is it really the case? You have to prove it first. And
Mm-hmm.
in your field of expertise, electrics, electricians, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are there are a lot of you see a problem and then you say, oh, this might be the cause, and then you fix it. Oh, there it is. It works again. In terms of the level of working, um, maybe you got the course wrong, but you still get the thing going. Is there something that is not common in your field?
Oh, certainly. Like, that's a good point. Like, sometimes you could say, well, maybe it's this, and then you try to do something and you make a little mistake and you do something that you didn't intend to do, but it still works. Yeah,
Yeah,
that can happen a lot.
yeah. This is the point I'm trying to make in terms of working, like in comparison to a working model. Yeah, it can still work, but it is really the cause of it. Not necessary, I would say.
True. So how do we, like you and me, how our methods of, like, my method of determining if something is a reliable theory or hypothesis or something that's less reliable is going to be if that thing, not if it can just explain the stuff that we're seeing, because anything, I can make up a million things that can explain it, but if there's things that make testable hypotheses, testable hypotheses, is there a plural for that? What is, if you watch T Jump, he says this a lot. If they make novel testable predictions, that's a good way to distinguish something false from something that correlates with reality. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. I would say if the theory is correct, yes,
Well,
you
hold
can
on.
make
Like,
examples.
let's back up a tiny little bit, because when we say theory, I'm sure that they've kind of, you've heard this before, but a theory is like one of the highest levels of knowledge that we could have.
Yes. If the experiment is being validated, it becomes a theory. Otherwise, it's a hypothesis.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
that?
So, like, you accept the theory of germ theory.
Yeah, I do. I do.
You
Yeah.
expect
Germ
you
theory
Well, what about
exists.
like evolutionary theory? Where are you on that?
I don't believe in evolution. Well, here's the thing. There are a lot of aspects you can quote the name theory, but it doesn't really go through the scientific method. Not necessarily, especially evolution. How can you test evolution?
Well,
It's
let's
not
not
observable.
let's not talk about that. But
Yeah,
I mean,
that's one thing. But
to me, like, you know, so I just wanted to get like through some of this language. Like I'm trying to be careful just personally of not saying the word theory,
Yes.
incorrectly, like hypothesis, right? Like let's say we have these hypotheses. Okay, the stars are rotating because the earth is round, or the stars are rotating because the earth is flat, and they're, so you have these two hypotheses. How are you going to distinguish one that's imagination and one that's reality, right? How would you do it, Feng?
I would say, in terms of the sky, in terms of the movement of the luminaries, you you cannot actually use the scientific method to validate it, because you can go through the first step, right? Observation. Yes, the stars moving. The stars seem to rotate. That's the furthest you can go. As soon as you try to go into the other step, which is making a hypothesis, there are certain things you have to include, right? And the independent variable, the dependent variable, and the control variable. Well, the independent variable is the cause of your phenomenon. For the globe is the Earth's rotating, and for the flat Earth is the stars rotating.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the independent variable for both sides. But how are you going to how are you going to validate it? You cannot ask the Earth not to rotate.
Yeah,
No,
right.
no, you cannot ask the stars not to rotate. So
Mm-hmm.
that so to me, you cannot validate this phenomenon using scientific method. So, in other words, it's not science. So people will use other proofs to prove it,
Well,
and
hold
they
on
are
a
all.
second. Let's slow down there for a second. So you have we're looking at the stars, right? So, but just for you, Feng, how looking at the stars, and we have these two hypotheses. How are you going to filter out between the two of them if you feel like it's not scientific to use the stars as your dependent variable on either hypothesis, the flat or the round? Then
Mhm.
how are you gonna determine which one's imaginary and which one's real?
Mm. This all boils down to the world of view you're holding, because you cannot validate it by yourself. It's equally valid. The two claims, where the Earth's rotating or the stars rotating, are equally valid, and you cannot distinguish it from the two based on your own senses.
Right.
So it you have to rely on your world of view, and your world of view is built up throughout your life, and then whether you're being told by a teacher, by your parents, by the social media, by the television, all
Mm-hmm.
that all that for this society right now, everybody's belief that we are on the globe is based on what other people told them, because obviously no one has gone to the space. No one, I mean no one. So everybody has to rely on the media they are exposed to, or the textbooks.
Yeah.
This is
So
how they tell
yeah.
this belief.
No, I agree with you that we're all kind of products of the people around us and the environment around us and the media and things like this. But don't you think that there's some people that are like you, that are thinkers, they're independent thinkers that have come to the conclusion that the Earth is a globe based on the same reasons that you've come to the conclusion that it's flat?
I'm sure there is. I'm sure there is. But I'm saying that all the methods we use cannot be called science, or cannot be called scientific,
Mm-hmm.
because of the reasons I've just told. And you cannot verify your
Right.
independent variable.
Yeah. So
So
so if it's not science, if it's not scientific, then what method do you use to determine what is reality and what's imagination?
well, apart from the scientific method, and there's a lot of other ways to come to your conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said in the very beginning, for me is the timeline, is the timeline of the realization of us being on a globe. This is the most disturbing. And other than that, there are a few arguments circling around in the community, uh, which notifies the notion of the globe.
Which what?
Well, and
What did you say? Which notifies the globe?
yeah,
What
yeah.
what do you
I'll say it's pretty convincing.
well what do you mean by that?
And there are a few arguments going around on the community. What one of it is being you cannot have gas pressure without a container because in the globe model, a vacuum exists right near adjacent to the atmosphere we
No,
are living on.
yeah, I'm aware. I'm aware of the arguments. I'm probably like you. I'm very fascinated by these debates. I watch every single flat Earth debate I can get my hands on. I've been listening to flat Earth debates literally all day long, and evolution debates. It's one of my favorite things.
Yeah,
So I'm aware of all the arguments and things like that. But what I'm
yeah,
interested in is like, okay, so you hear this argument about the gas pressure thing, and I agree with you. It doesn't make sense to me. Like, but when I hear the arguments on the other side from the MC tunes and the fights, I just kind of have to go fall back on that the scientific method works, and that well, if it's a gradient and if gravity's real, then I guess because gravity's a theory, and I usually just go with the scientific consensus and say, well, then that kind of makes sense. If gravity's holding the air down and it's creating this gradient, then I guess that makes sense. But I understand where you're coming from, that it doesn't really make sense. Why is there a vacuum and there's air? You know, but
yeah.
so for you, it seems like you're just kind of stuck in this position of it doesn't make sense to me, so it can't be true. I mean, that's not how you would put it, but for somebody like me, it kind of seems like that from the outside.
Mm. That's the thing. You rely on the general consensus. Says, uh, well, gravity is a theory, so it must be true. The thing is, like I said, a story is built upon another story, which all of it has never been proven, and so is
Hold on.
gravity.
Let's talk about that for a second. So, you've heard it said that science doesn't prove things, right?
Or the yes, I heard it, but the science does prove things.
You think
That's the
science
only
proves things?
yes, of course. That's the only reason for the scientific method to
Well,
exist. It proves things.
what's wrong with science people just saying science doesn't prove things? It just makes
Well,
it,
they they
it disproves things, or it makes things more likely or less likely, because we can never prove that we're not a brain in a vat. That could always be a
what
potential possibility, right?
yeah, the like the Boltzmann's ring, right?
Yeah, we could that could always be the case. We can never prove that it's not that. So we can never
And
prove
it is
anything, really, right? Doesn't that make sense?
yeah. What I think what they're trying to say is their line of science doesn't prove things.
Yeah. But
They
there's
they,
some things that we can.
their discipline, yeah, their discipline doesn't prove things.
Yeah.
Disciplines like
Well, math can prove
astronomy.
things, right?
Well, math describes things. Math doesn't prove
But there's
things. You can
well, you don't you
math
don't
is
go.
like a language.
Yeah, but like two.
How can you prove things with language?
Oh well, we're just saying like 2 apples plus 2 apples is 4 apples, right? That's proof. That's a
Yeah,
mathematical
well,
proof.
but what happened to one apple minus three apples?
Well, that's negative 2 apples.
Yeah, but does negative two apples exist in the world? No.
No, I mean it's not like a real thing, right? It's just like a
Yeah,
it's a
that's what
it's
I
a
mean. That's
language.
what I meant. Yeah,
but
it's a
it,
language. Yeah,
but
but and language doesn't prove things.
you don't.
So
I mean, but you don't think math can prove things?
math can describe a certain phenomenon quite accurately and quantitatively. Yes, it can do that. It can do that very well. But
But
in
that
terms
to
of
the
proving it
mathematicians. Go
but in
ahead.
terms of proving qualitatively, but uh, whether this thing does exist, math doesn't.
No,
Math
no,
can't do
math.
it.
Yeah, math's not going to prove that you know the Earth is
It,
flat or
it, it's
whatever.
like
But
it's like it's like if I have a whole set of equations describing unicorns, how much air is gonna take in with it as every breath, all that how much energy is gonna consume every day. Will this conjure the unicorn into existence?
no, no, yeah, yeah, you're
No,
right. I
no.
mean, you're right about
But I
that. But I
yeah, I
think
have all the math.
yeah. Well, I mean, I'm just saying like I think what the mathematicians mean by that is like on a basic level we can but it's not like it's not proving things like the in the reality. It's just an imaginary 2 plus an imaginary 2 is an imaginary 4, and that's proof, right? It's not, you
Yeah,
know what I mean?
well, if you're not dealing with reality, you're just first first assume that the thing exists, and then you calculate, how much it's gonna do with this force of this black
Yeah, I mean
hole,
we're
or
not talking
yeah,
about
you can do that. You can do
yeah, I
that.
mean we're not going to I don't want to drag like physics into the math. I'm just saying I think what the math people are saying is that, or even like the science people are saying the scientific endeavor doesn't prove things. That's for
Mm.
math. Math can prove things, but science, because we can never prove that aliens didn't just inject these memories into my head right
Oh, oh,
a
oh.
second
Okay.
ago. You know what I mean?
Okay. Hold on. So that's why not everything can be called science, because science is trying to establish a cause and effect relationship. So nowadays people use the term science very loosely, right?
Yeah,
Everything is
sure.
science. Everything is scientific.
Yeah.
Whether it's a running car, whether it's hi-fi, whether anything, whether it is how can you learn more scientifically? You can't, because the term science is very niche in terms of establishing the cause and effect relationship.
Right.
Anything outside of that, you cannot call it science. And then there is another term called pseudoscience, where there are certain types of certain line of discipline who calls themselves science, but doesn't follow the scientific method. That's what we call pseudoscience. I suppose the people who said science doesn't prove things, it is
Mhm.
from the line of this discipline.
You think oh,
Because
you think that saying science doesn't prove things is pseudoscience?
well, the phrase is itself is not pseudoscience. It's the phrase itself is nonsensical, because the
Hmm.
only thing because the only thing the scientific method serves is proving things. You either validate your null hypothesis, or you validate your alternative hypothesis. One of it, one of each has to be true, but they are mutually exclusive.
But
You
they
cannot
could
you
both be
cannot
not true, right?
yeah, they cannot both be not true. No,
They can't.
one of them has to be true.
Well,
How?
give
Because
me
in
an
the
example.
okay, water water boils at at 100 degrees, right, in normal pressure. So this is a phenomenon we observe. Okay, water boils, yeah. And what's the hypothesis? Well, somebody can say heat. If you apply heat to the water to a certain level, it boils. So that's a hypothesis. And heat is your independent variable. Okay, so you go to test it. You apply heat. And then there is a no hypothesis attached to it in the formulation of the hypothesis stage. So the alternative is if heat, then water boils, and then the null hypothesis is if heat, water doesn't boil. So they are, so you see they are mutually exclusive. They cannot both be true,
Oh,
and they
I see what
cannot
you're
both be
saying.
not true. Yeah,
Right.
this is the
But
formulation of the hypothesis makes it can only prove one of each.
right. But
That's
that
the
seems
point.
like to me like a poorly formed hypothesis. Like you could like to me it would be like a good experiment would be okay, what makes water boil? Let's see. So I'm going to make a hypothesis and I'm
Yeah.
going to test it, right? And if I can predict the future, then that's good evidence that my hypothesis is true.
Oh, uh, that's the thing. I hear this all the time. You can predict the future with it, right?
Yeah.
I hear this all the time. But don't you think before predicting it, predicting with it, you have to first prove it is actually the cause of something first, not to first assume. Well, not to assume it exists or it is real in the first place
Well,
before you
no,
making
I think you
predictions
just
with it.
well, no, what you I think what the scientific method does is they just make a wild guess and then they assume it's
Of the
true
cause.
and
No,
then
no, it doesn't work like that.
well hold on. Let me just like see how if it's going to make any sense. So science would say let's try a different example. Okay, let's do something in my field like okay, electricity. How does it work? Okay, well, I think that it's atoms exchanging electrons. Okay, I'm just this is my hypothesis. I'm just guessing it. I'm guessing that that's the case. We don't know. Let's just go back in time. We don't know what it is. But I'm guessing
Hmm.
it's atoms exchanging electrons. So I'm guessing that that's it and then I assume that that's true and then I make a test and I do the whole independent variable thing. And if I can make a test and it you know, it my prediction comes true, wouldn't that be good evidence that the thing that I assume to be true is true?
This is this is this is a proof, but not scientific because you see you jump from a hypothesis straight to an experiment, and then you mentioned you make an independent variable and dependent variable, but your independent variable in the experiment is not your independent variable in your hypothesis because you assume that atoms exchange electrons, right?
Yeah,
That's your
that's the
hypothesis.
hypothesis. Yep.
Yeah, and the experiment formation is to test your hypothesis. The experiment is known as the hypothesis test. So you have to test your hypothesis first. Of course, in your example, at the end of the day, electric flows, and then it's all good. We have electricity, right?
Mhm.
But it when it comes down to and when it comes down to the hypothesis you make, you said atoms exchange electrons. You didn't validate this part.
Well, that's what the
You
test is for, right? You
yeah
just
you did, but
you just take it for
the test
granted. You just assume it and then make a prediction. And if the prediction
in
comes true, then shouldn't that
now
be good evidence that it is true?
now I can I agree that electricity exists, and we know quite a bit about electricity, right?
Mhm.
But the thing is, you didn't validate your very first hypothesis. I can very well say, well, it's not atoms exchanging electrons. It's a
Mhm.
unicorn. It's a very tiny unicorn
Right,
that
right.
travels back and forth.
Right.
And then you do and then you set up exactly the same experiment you mentioned, and
Yeah.
then it still works.
Yeah. So that
Then can I? Yeah, then can I say, oh, it's because of the little tiny unicorns running through the wires,
Yeah.
carrying carrying something called electric
Yeah.
blocks.
No, and I think
Yeah, I can also say that.
right. But what and the crazy thing is I think that that would be evidence for tiny unicorns.
Yeah, yeah. So what? So that's my point. If you don't validate your first hypothesis, and then before moving on,
Right.
using it to predict something,
But that,
how
I mean,
how
that's a kind of a
how you
crude,
how you
yeah. And I think the thing you're pointing out is the same confusion I have is that like how evidence works. But I just think that that's the crazy thing. But what we experience with our life is the result of this method. But it doesn't. I mean, we haven't. We haven't come up with any evidence for tiny unicorns. The hypothesis of electron exchange is the one that makes the testable hypothesis, the testable, you know, thing that we just said. That's the one that actually has the evidence, not the tiny unicorns.
yeah
That isn't making testable predictions. It's the electron exchange one. So that one has
yeah
the better proof, right?
yeah. And well, tiny unicorns is a little bit far fetched. I agree, but the thing is when it comes down to the like the shape of the Earth. Like I said in the beginning, the globe Earth is very well covered. A lot of phenomenon can be explained by this model, but it can also be explained by the flat Earth
Yeah. So again,
paradigm.
like we're at the same spot. Like that's the problem of underdetermination is we can explain it with a million different hypotheses, but the
Yeah,
one that can make the novel testable predictions is the one that you should believe, right?
yeah, yeah, and it all goes back to the first point I make. It all depends on your world of view, and your
Well,
world of view can change. And
sure.
let me ask you something. If science doesn't prove things, why are we still gonna trust it? Because it can be overthrown any minute, like gravity, like the theory of gravity.
Mhm.
Everybody thinks it's Newtonian gravity and mass attracting mass, but in the current rhetoric, the Newtonian is no more. It is replaced by Einsteinian.
Yeah.
But people still say mass attracting mass all the time. It's still in the textbook. It's still in the high school textbook. It's still in the university textbook. But then later on, they tell you, oh, it's actually Einsteinian right now. It's Newton is no longer be considered. But why is everybody still parroting the Newtonian gravity? Because the social media, because the television, because the teacher and at their young age still teaches it. But in reality, in the current rhetoric, it is Einsteinian.
Well,
Or
I
moreover
think
is yeah.
I think it's a sign of something being true if it can change its mind with new data. Like, you and I both have seen like these Netflix shows or whatever, like with cults and things that are very like fundamental and they won't change their minds on anything no matter what the evidence, right? I mean,
Mhm.
that seems to me to be a sign of something that's not true if it decides this is the truth and it never changes even with new evidence. Like in my field, the electricity field, the rules change all the time with the development of new technologies, and when we learn more about things, the code book changes constantly. Every 3 or 4 years we get a new code book
Yes.
because it
The
reflects the new technology and new things that we learn. So it seems to me to
yes,
be a sign of something being true.
the code changes all the time because there are always a better way to do the same thing more efficiently.
Yeah, but also because
Yes,
of
I
new
agree. The code,
technologies and because we understand new
yeah,
things, right?
technology is about how to make something work. Actually, for a technician, you don't have to know all the backgrounds of anything of in terms of how this will work. You just have to know how this would work. And then technology is about how to make things better, how to make things better. Of
Right.
course, now in terms of technology, they are built on science, which is validated cause and effect relationship, and people rely on it. Imagine if the laws or the proven scientific theories can be thrown off any day, like tomorrow. Imagine what the world could be, because every technology we use rely on the laws and the validated scientific experiments we did in the past. If science doesn't prove things, all the technology we use can be can break down any moment.
Wait, but
So that's
wait, I don't,
so
I
that
don't, I don't
sorry.
I don't understand that at all. Like, just be like, let's say tomorrow they say, okay, this thing that we've thought were radio waves that were like, that you could talk over the internet. It actually is not that. It's something else. But that wouldn't mean that the phones would stop working. We would just say we didn't understand. We called it radio waves, but it was really radio waves, right?
Mm-hmm.
We would just change
Yeah.
the language and update the science, but the phone would still
Oh,
work,
so yeah.
right?
So yeah, you're right. You're right. The phone will still work, but so that's why technology isn't is you cannot mix technology with science together. Technology is, like I said, making something work and making something work better.
Yeah.
That's technology. Yeah, and a lot of and how do they come up with this technology in the first place? It's because validated scientific theories. So people use the term science and a lot. So it becomes to the point that whenever somebody claims science, people automatically think, oh, okay, science. So scientific method, IVDV, oh, it's all been validated.
Mhm.
But but the reality is, it is not. Some discipline doesn't go through the scientific method, but still calls themselves science. That's the
Mhm.
point. And this is the very meaning of pseudoscience.
Well,
Take
let me.
astronomy. Take astronomy. It calls themselves as science, right? But
I,
can
I
it
don't
go
know.
through any of the science? Can it go through the scientific theory, scientific method? Well, it can get past observation. It observes something in the sky, but that's it. How can you formulate an hypothesis? You cannot. So
Right.
that's why I say not everything can be called science.
Yeah.
That's my point.
Well, I think that, and I'm okay with admitting that I don't know how they form these scientific theories, or I don't know much about the scientific method. And but I'm okay. I'm okay with saying that I accept enough of the scientific theories that it proves itself to me to be a reliable method. I don't think there's some conspiracy that they're trying to lie to us about the theory of germ theory or the theory of electromagnetivity or the theory of evolution or the theory of gravity. I think that the scientific method has pretty much proven itself to be pretty darn reliable, and it changes when it's wrong and it updates and it's fallible. And but I mean, I agree with you that people shouldn't just take it like, because people make mistakes and say, things like, you've seen it. I mean, you and I both have seen it on TV where people are like, well, the science says that,
Yeah.
this germ thing does this, or the vaccine does this, or whatever does that, and they just take it at its word, right? But I think in the history generally of science, it's pretty much proven itself to be pretty darn reliable, don't you think?
Yes, I agree. Science or the scientific method is reliable because it proves things. That's makes that makes it reliable. You said quite a few theories 2 minutes ago. You mentioned germ theory. You mentioned electromagnetic magnetic theory or whatever. I
Mm-hmm.
forgot. And then you sneak in the theory of gravity and the theory of evolution. This is a point. Theory of gravity and theory of evolution didn't go through the scientific method, but yet people still use the word theory on and still calls it science. And then what happens is the two things will sneak into the other validated science and then disguise it as a part of science. So everybody every time when people hear, oh, the theory of gravity, or it's a theory, it's science, so it must be proven. In reality, it's not.
Well,
This
to
is the
me,
this is the this is the one layer of story
no,
built upon another layer of story that I'm talking about.
and I
It
appreciate you.
eventually becomes too big.
Yeah, I appreciate your skepticism on that. But for me, like I would never say, and I hope nobody would say that it's a theory, therefore it's proven. I would hope they would say it's a theory, therefore there's a lot of evidence, and the experts all agree that it reflects reality.
Yeah, and yeah, that's appeal to general consensus.
Well,
Everybody thinks it's true, and it must be true.
what's wrong with that?
Well, well, if if the world is run by a few very powerful people, they can literally make the rest of the world think whatever they want. That's the thing. So it all boils down to people believe it is a the world we live in is a globe. It is
Mm-hmm.
not about scientific. It is not about scientific evidence. It is not about they prove it for themselves. It's about the things that everybody says is true. So I better stick in this camp. Otherwise, I'll be ridiculed. Otherwise, I'll be labeled as freaks and morons and science deniers and all that.
Mm-hmm.
It is appealing to the general consensus, the feeling of want to being safe as a part of a big group,
Yeah.
rather than it's proven by science.
Mm-hmm. So
It,
like
it,
comparing
it, it
comparing like
makes
the
sense.
comparing like me to you, I accept all the theories of science, but for you, you accept all of them
The ones
except
can be
for,
validated by the scientific method.
well,
That's what
I
I
mean,
believe.
but if you were to ask the experts, they would say that they're validated by the scientific method.
Well, they all say that. They all say that. But if you ask them what that's the thing. There are a lot of fields in science that are actually following the scientific method. They are actually making a cause and effect relationship. They're actually establishing that, and this is good science, and we rely on it. The reality relies on the science of these disciplines. But on the other hand, there are a lot of disciplines that claim to be science but doesn't follow the scientific method. That's my point.
Right, but
I'm not saying
but they
that
would say
there's
that
a
they are though.
well they would say they would say they are,
So how?
but if you think about it, if you think about it, astronomy, well, you look at the sky, you observe something happening in the sky. If you are familiar with the scientific method, you would see my point. You cannot formulate a viable scientific hypothesis to your phenomenon.
Right.
Even if you could, how are you going to change and manipulate your
Well,
IV, your
I
independent variable? You can't.
I mean,
So you
I
can't do science in that kind of
well,
thing.
I think that at the root of your epistemology is this kind of thing of like the scientific method, right? But you know, the same people that brought you this scientific method are the same people that bring you gravity and evolution. So, but you trust them that the scientific method works, but not the results of it?
Well, if if you okay, the theory of gravity, is it does it follow the scientific method?
I think so. I mean, the majority of the experts think so.
But it isn't. But it isn't.
Well,
First of all, theory of gravity. Which gravity are you talking about? Is it a Newtonian or Einsteinian? Because
I don't
because
know.
it is, yeah. So you
But I don't
that's the
know
thing.
about the theory of germs either, but I trust that they know what they're talking about.
So that's the point. Gravity is used when describing something goes down, something falls to the ground. So they say, see, this gravity. Like Neil deGrasse Tyson drops his mic. See, there's gravity, right?
Yeah,
Something falls down.
that's kind of
Something
silly.
falls down. But what about something that goes up? What about gas? It doesn't fall down. You
Right.
don't see you don't see helium just falls to the ground and
Yeah.
get us in the pond. You don't see that. So
Right.
so the phenomenon is something falls, and but at the same time something rises.
Mhm.
What other than gravity that asserts a universal downward factor which affects all things to the center of the mass can explain that? Well, density, density disequilibrium.
Okay, well,
Can you?
I'm not prepared to talk about stuff like that. I'm more interested in the epistemology, right? Like, why do you believe? Like, I'm more interested in why do you not believe the experts, right? Because I'm not prepared to say that there's, I don't know how many thousands of scientists are working full time right now to
Mhm.
on the theory of gravity. I'm not prepared to say that they're not very smart or they're fooled by the government or whatever conspiracies going on. I'm just not prepared to say that because I look at the results of what they're doing. They're building crazy cars and technologies and phones and computers and they're
What
making
what does
progress, right?
what sorry, one thing. What does making cars and computers has to do with the theory of gravity?
Well, it's the same. It to me, it's
Well,
the
it's
same
not.
process, right?
That's why I said there are a lot of good
But
sciences.
but like
The
Fang,
things we rely on, there's things we build on our technology upon. But there are also disciplines that disguise themselves as science, but
I
it's
know,
not.
but you're
Thing.
kind of prepared to say that they have been fooled into thinking it's following the scientific method, but it's not according to you. But I'm not prepared to say that. I'm just prepared to say I don't understand the scientific method as well as they do. So I'm not gonna put my foot out there and say they're doing it wrong, even though they've proven that they're very smart and that the peer review and the methods that they use to distinguish imagination from truth work because they're making technologies that
Yeah,
work. But
he,
you seem to be
he,
prepared to say that they're fooled and that they don't, for some reason, they're not able to see that they're not actually following the scientific method. Don't you think that's like a little bit arrogant to say?
no, it is not. Actually, the scientists themselves admit they don't follow the scientific method in their discipline. Like Michio Kaku, he say it right. He say it up front. Well, nobody. I'm paraphrasing it. And nobody in my field follow the so-called scientific method. It's all guesswork. It's all imagination. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's uh, that's what he says. He actually admits it. So that's the thing. There are a lot of good scientists, but
But if he's making testable novel predictions that are coming true, how are you going to say that
yeah,
his methods are wrong?
well, like you said, under determination, there are a lot of there are a lot of models or a lot of explanations can
Yes.
explain the same phenomenon.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
like you said, like you said. So,
The ones that make the the guesses that come true are the ones that we should believe, not the
well,
ones
I
that
would
don't.
say I would say in terms of the shape of the Earth, a round Earth and a flat Earth can make equally valid predictions and explanations to the surroundings of our of where we live. Is
yeah, I
is
mean,
equally
I
valid.
no,
But
I
but
understand
but
that.
how come? Yeah, yeah. But sorry. But how come everybody believes in a round Earth instead of a flat Earth? Because what we see and what we observe every day is flat. Nobody sees a round Earth for themselves. The reason they believe in it is because they were told in a very young age, and then ever since then, every media, every book, everywhere they go, it portrays a round Earth. So that's why people believe in it. And then
Well, hold
and then
on.
you you
You
you,
gotta,
you seem to jump back and forth between general consensus and scientific proofs,
yeah. I mean
and then,
that.
and then you landed on general consensus
Yeah, I mean,
more of the time.
I think that my method of like determining what I'm going to put confidence in is probably
Mhm.
more reliable than yours. Like, because I understand that when I look out on the world and I see it, I don't feel like I'm moving 1,000 miles an hour. I don't feel like
Yeah, no
I'm
doubt.
seeing that the Earth is flat. But I think that me basing my world on just how I feel about things is very unreliable. Because my kids ask me like, "Why is the moon following me home?" Well, honey, it's not following you home. Well, it looks like it is. Our senses are not always very reliable. So, you know, I don't think that's a reliable way to know truth. It's just how I feel
Yeah,
about things.
yeah, I agree. It all boils down to the world of view that you're holding. Like your daughter is asking a legitimate question. Why is the moon following you or following her home? Well, it's not. It's like you see one magic trick, and then you think, oh, everything I see is magic. I cannot trust my senses anymore. It's, this is your line of thinking. Well, illusions exist. Yes, true, but is all everything we see in reality an illusion? Not necessarily.
Yeah, I mean that's a good
In,
point.
in,
As
in
and
contrast,
yeah,
in
I,
contrast, yeah, in contrast, in real life, you don't feel spin. You don't feel spinning in at 1,000 miles per hour at the equator. You don't see the curvature of the Earth, but well, you don't see it, but it's just because you don't see it, but it is what it is. Actually, it is based on your worldview. But and how do you establish your worldview at a very young age, when you are not able to comprehend things for yourself? You have to rely on the people you trust, say like your teacher, say like your parents. I'm not saying them the teacher is lying to you, because the teachers were told when they're kids, this is how things works.
mm-hmm.
And if you have a very good model that can explain a lot of things in reality, and then you push this model over time, it doesn't take long, 3 generations, 2 or 3 generations, everybody will believe it. But whether or not it is true, that's the other story.
Mm-hmm. Right, but
Yeah, that's
we kind of come
that's my
back
point,
to no,
basically,
and
to you.
I mean that's a really good point. I mean, I think we all need to look out for just believing things just because we were taught them, right? We have to really think critically about why we believe things. And I've come to the conclusion that you and I both live in a world that science built, and we're kind of at their we're kind of at their behest. Like we don't really have much of a say because you and I both can't take a rocket ship to space and look at the Earth, right? We can't do
Yes.
that. But we can like, we can do little experiments and here and there, but they're not convincing, no flat earther really is going to be convinced by any experiment a round earther would do, and the opposite. It's because of our already preconceived notions, right? it's the things that we accept, and I just feel like I don't know where the line is for you, but I'm gonna say I think that the scientific method has brought us the phone, it's brought us the airplane, the motor, electro, all the electric stuff that's amazing in the world and complicated, and I don't understand it, but it works. And so I'm going to give confidence in that the scientific method works and that peer review works and the experts know what they're talking about. And when the experts say that the earth is round, I think it's reasonable to accept the consensus when they have basically proven that there's a reliable method. But for you, at some point, you say, I don't like this theory or this theory because it doesn't follow
It doesn't follow the.
my
No, no, no.
conception
It doesn't.
of the scientific theory, right?
Well, there is only one scientific method, and if you don't follow it, you're not doing science. It's
Well,
simple
what
as that.
about would you think that
You don't have
Mikio Okaku, what's his name?
Michio Kaku, that Japanese
Yeah,
scientist with
yeah,
the
I know
white
about him.
hair.
But he would say he's doing science even though he's not following
Yeah,
the scientific method, right?
yeah. So that's that's the point. He he told you openly that he doesn't follow the scientific method, and then in the very next breath, he says, "Well, I'm still doing science."
Right. So what's I
That's the
mean, just because yeah, I think you can still
and then
do good science and not follow a strict rules of it has to have this and this and this, right? I mean, if he's making good theories and he's making novel testable predictions that are coming true, whatever he's doing is working, and I think it's reasonable to believe that it's working, right?
it is, and there's a term called appeal to authority.
Yeah. That's
Say
exactly
it is, yeah. Everybody
Oh, I lost you.
appeal to authority. It's like when you are a kid, when you and I were a kid, right? We rely on our parents to give us shelter, give us food, give us money. Not everything our parents says we agree to at certain point.
Mhm.
I'm sure everybody has experienced that. But because they are in power, because they provide us with so many things, we have to obey them.
Mhm.
This is what it boils down to in your analogy. Even though Michio Kaku does not follow the scientific method, but because he's a scientist, he knows more than you and I do, so we have to trust him.
Yeah,
That's it. This
don't
is appeal to authority.
yeah, and I think it's okay to appeal to authority. I mean, like a parent though,
Flat
they're
earthers
not
and
really
so
like our parents aren't really authority on anything because they don't have a degree in parenting. They
he
haven't been through the strict process of getting a degree and learning how to do proper science, right? But
it,
the experts
it's the
that have
same.
done in the field for decades, I think they're worth trusting.
It's the same thing. You said the world we live on is built by scientists and the scientific method, and I agree. A lot of it, uh, well, all of our technologies are built on science and the scientific method. And then the next thing you said, well, if the same term science and the science community who brought us the convenience and the technology we can use today, if they tell us the world is a globe, then there is no reason to doubt it. It's the same analogy. Even if you do like me, you still have to give them credit. It's the same analogy that I give with the parents. Even though you don't agree with them 100% of the time, there are things that you disagree with them, but because they provide uh, but because if they obey them, this is what's happening right now. So there are a small group of people like flat earthers who questions the current rhetoric. This is all we do.
Yeah, and
But
I really appreciate
yeah,
what you're
if you
doing.
ask me,
I do.
yeah, if you ask me where to draw the line, I guess we are the little section of rebellious kids who dares to question the rhetoric put forth by our parents. In this case, the government, the scientific body as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
We're the bunch of people who dares to question it because nobody is born a flat earther nowadays. Everybody is taught we live in spaceships and aliens and Mars and everything else. I'm fully on board with it
Right,
before.
right.
Yeah,
And I agree with you that there's people out there that just believe things just because they're told. And I don't. I mean, and I guess I would have to say that I have to put myself in that category just to be honest. But because I think it's just a consistent worldview. Because I feel like if
mm,
I'm going to accept germ theory, if I'm going to accept that cell phones work and planes work, that I have to accept the same process that brought those things to me, even though I don't understand it, right? And I still think that your understanding of the scientific method is not probably as accurate as the experts would say. Just like Michio Kaku would say, maybe he doesn't use the scientific method
he
that you're talking about,
used
but he's
yeah he is
using he's using a scientific method, and it's
what
making
they
progress and it's making testable
there's only
predictions, right?
there's only one scientific method, and Michio Kaku also says he doesn't use the scientific method.
Well, he's using
There's only
some
one.
well, to him he's using
He,
a different
he,
scientific method, right?
he's using some method. He's using some method. In his case, maths, but he cannot use the term scientific method. That's the point. He's of course he's using some method. In his case, math. He's the one who came up with the string theory. Is what is it? What it is basically is all maths. You cannot validate it in real life in any means. It's all maths. But he calls himself a scientist, a theoretical physicist,
Yeah,
whatever that is. But it's got nothing to do with our reality. That's the
right.
point. And this is the kind of people he kept being promoted all the
Yeah.
time.
I
You see
mean, but
it on
but
TV, you listen to what he says, but in reality, what he does has no bearing to the real world,
right.
to reality
But
whatsoever.
you would be prepared to tell him you are not following the scientific method, therefore what you're doing is not science. You would be prepared to tell that to him?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
And
And
you
he
and you
he
don't
also
you don't think he
he
would
even he
he
even
would
admits it.
have a good response to that cuz he's very smart.
Well, that's the well he that's the thing. And everything has a response to it. Everything. I mean everything. Um. Okay. Does it mean if you have a response to it, does it mean what you're saying is correct or is true? Because it's all boils down to the truth, whether or not we live in a ball or a flat Earth.
Yeah, and
You
I
can you can believe you can actually you can believe the world is square or concave or whatever.
a
It
pyramid
doesn't it
maybe.
doesn't make any yeah it doesn't make any difference. But for flat earthers, even though we have some indisputable proof that the Earth must be flat, what does it make? What difference does it make in your real life? Well, if you think about it, it doesn't. You still have to get up in the morning, go to work, get showered, and still have to feed your kids. You still have to feed your and provide your parents if they get old. Everything stays the same. But for flat earthers, well, what something really is actually matters.
What?
And this is a funny thing. A flat Earth theory is the thing that got we ridiculed the most. What before flat Earth theory, there are concave, convex, electromagnetic universe, all sorts of wild theory exists long before flat Earth. But why does flat Earth theory getting so much attention, and why did it triggered people the most? It is because people are programmed to such reactions early in the life.
Mm.
Well, in you're living in America, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your former president Obama even goes out to say in a public speech that we have no time for the flat Earth society, and make fun of it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, will he ever do the same thing to concavers? No, he won't. He won't. The question you have to ask yourself is why a president of the United States have to address this kind of crazy notion of this crazy ideas. Well, but meanwhile, a lot of crazy ideas already exist, and nobody cares to talk about it.
Right. But I mean,
Yeah,
so
that's
for
the thing you have to think about.
yeah, I mean, but for you, you've come to the conclusion. I mean, where do you stand? Are you actually a flat earther or just a globe skeptic?
I am a flat earther. I'm
Oh,
a,
okay.
Bible believing flat earther.
So why don't you go with the convex thing? Convex
Well,
Earth. What's wrong with that?
there's nothing wrong about it.
Well,
The term flat Earth is a fairly new word. It's it's actually for flat earthers we don't have a model, or we don't have a model yet, because what we realize is that we don't live in a globe. So concave or convex, whatever, we are okay with it. Well, as long as you bring solid arguments or solid evidence
mhm.
for it,
Mhm.
we can entertain these sort of theories, or this sort of notions. But the thing for the globers is well, it has to be a globe, right? It has to be a globe. It can't be anything else. That's the difference between the flat earthers, if you will, to globe believing people. We we know we don't know what it is, but we know what it isn't. That's the point.
Mhm. Well, yeah, I mean, but that's like the scientific method, right? It was we can never prove
Oh,
what
it's not
something
scientific.
is, but we can prove what something isn't, right?
Well, it's kind of like that, but like I said, you can't always bind everything to science or a scientific method. The
Right.
term is used too loosely
Yeah.
nowadays. Everything
Okay.
is
Well,
science,
let's do this before we shut her down. Um, let's talk about the scientific method because I'm just not quite. I, I- I'm astonished that you are willing to say that you know what the scientific method is, and that science at large isn't following it. You know what I mean? I mean that's just such a bold statement. I'm just not prepared to do that, but you are. So
do you know? Hmm, do
let
you know
let go
how
ahead.
am I how can I say such a thing? Because it's well documented. Because there's even a paper, an academic paper, um, stating that nowadays less than 3% of the paper published
Mm-hmm.
is following the scientific method. Is a
Less
peer
than
reviewed
three? Is that what you're
paper.
saying? Less than three
Yeah,
percent?
I forgot the actual figure. It's either 3 or 5. It's low. It's
Mm-hmm.
low. That's
Mm-hmm.
my point.
Mm-hmm.
There's an academic paper which states that actually there are they laid it all out for you.
Mm-hmm.
They laid it all out for you.
Well, what it?
Obviously,
Wh-
I didn't do the research. Some other flat did that research and then they publish it.
right. Um. Well,
So
what
the
if
effort,
the scientific method is kind of like this the thing that I'm dealing with regularly, like the code book, the NEC, the National Electric Code, and like it. What if like what you're saying is we need to follow the 2014 NEC, and anyone who doesn't follow the 2014 NEC isn't doing electric work, right? But
mhm,
there's some people who go, well, we're going to do the 2017 or the 2020 rules instead of the 2014.
mhm.
Well, what what if they're
Because
just doing an updated version of it? It doesn't mean that all the houses aren't burning down. They're still doing good electric work, but they're just not following the 2014.
they're not the same. You see, the scientific method. Well, doing an experiment requires a whole bunch of knowledge, but understanding how the scientific method works doesn't require all that. All it requires is a consistent thinking of logic, and and then and the scientific method is very well documented. That's the thing. Everybody can look it up. It's not something that flat earthers make it up.
No, I
Well,
agree with
the
you that
method,
it's like a
the method,
pretty.
yes. So the thing is, the method is here. It's well documented, and then it's also people who done academic papers saying that nowadays less than 10% of the people who publishes paper in the academic field follows the scientific method.
Mm-hmm.
What does it tell you? They're not doing science. But it's all there for you to dig.
Okay,
The question
let
is
me
whether or not you're willing to accept it. That's the
right.
point.
Let me see if this kind of resonates with you. So let's take something you accept, like planes work, right? Like
Yeah.
aerodynamics and engines and things, right? Right. So the people the people who are making airplanes, the aerodynamic science people in lab coats, they go, we can make this plane faster and more efficient if we do this. And then they make a hypothesis and then they
That's
construct
technology.
what?
That is different from science. That is technology. Science and technology are not the same thing.
Well,
Technology is built on science, but it's not science itself. That's the point.
what if they're going to they're constantly coming up with new technologies in plane engineering, right? And they're coming up with better things to understand how aerodynamics work and how to, abuse it and how to get around it, right? To make the planes
Mm.
more effective and efficient. And they use the scientific method, don't you think?
There's um there's another paper there's another paper published before. The title of it is "Science Isn't Technology," and confusing the two. I'm slightly paraphrasing it, and confusing the two is a hinder of the technology progress. That's
So
more or less the same thing.
that's
What it
interesting.
says,
I haven't heard
yeah,
somebody say that before. So like kind of
yes.
flesh that out. Like it seems like the scientific method is the thing that makes technology, right?
What the science behind how planes fly is aerodynamics, is the pressure difference on the top of the wing and versus the lower part of the wing, the bottom of the wing, right? That's what gives the lift of an aeroplane.
Mm-hmm.
This is validated, and people rely on this thing never change for the planes to fly. If if this thing changes, well, holy cow, how many planes are flying right now in the sky? So some things cannot be changed. Some things is validated. People rely on it. That's science,
Right.
and we rely on this type of science
Mm-hmm.
to build our technology, and upon it we think about ways to how to make things more efficient, how to make the planes fly faster. But in the very core of this science behind how how planes fly, the aerodynamics, you cannot change it. It's validated. That's the
because
point.
because there's a
That's the
there's a reality, right, that's behind it, right?
yeah, yeah.
And
Everything.
we're
Well,
just we're trying to invent language to describe it,
yeah,
right?
science deals with the real world.
Yeah.
Everything that is outside of the real world, like Mitchell Kaku's string theory, like 27 different dimensions, like Einstein's space-time mathematical construct 4 dimension,
Mhm.
that doesn't affect reality. But this is the type of knowledge or discipline got promoted, and everybody keeps saying, so, "Oh
Right.
yeah, that's science. That's been proven." Well, but in reality, it doesn't even deals with the real world that we're living in. That's the
Well,
point. That's the
well,
point.
what about like, I mean, it seems like you take I think you take for granted the complexity of some of the science around how cell phones work or computers or elec electric systems because we have them and they're
Mm,
demonstrable and they're tangible. But,
mm.
if I were to take a cell phone back in time, they would think it's magic or something, right?
Yes, you have to first in your field, right? Electricity. You have to first establish atoms transfer electrons. You have to first establish this first, and
Right.
then on top, on top of it, you have to first validate your supposition first. Okay, it is established, and then you can move on, and then you can move on to the next step. Oh, how can I utilize this? How can I utilize this effect? Well, I can put it in the wire, and then it transfer electricity, and then a light bulb goes up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's yeah.
I mean, it
From
seems strange to me that you like accept that theory. I mean, it's wild, right? I mean, that there's like tiny little things floating around everywhere that can shock you and make your phone work and make your house lights turn on. Like, why wouldn't you think that that's wrong and that it's like something else? Like it's, I don't know, you
mhm,
know.
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Well,
Well,
I mean, it
if
kind of matters because it appears to me that you accept the electromagnetic theory or whatever it is that atoms exchange electrons and it produces energy, and different atoms have different amounts of electrons in their valence shells, and they're better conductors and things like that. Like all of that's pretty complicated, but I don't think you would have a problem with that, right?
let me explain. You are comparing the shape of the Earth with electricity, right? Because they're both science, right?
Yeah, to me, I
I'll,
mean,
I'll tell, yeah, I'll tell you. It doesn't matter if the very core of the electricity is not atoms exchanging electrons, and the electronic devices still work. And by the same token, it doesn't matter if the Earth is a globe or is flat. The phenomenon we observe still applies, right?
yeah,
It really doesn't matter.
right.
Well, in terms of electricity, well, even if my wild guess that little unicorns are transferring blocks of electricity across is true, it doesn't make the device I'm using fail. But if you think the same thing in terms of the shape of the Earth, it makes a very big deal because what if the Earth is actually flat and then it's not a globe? That means somebody lied to you.
Mm-hmm. Or they
Yeah,
just
that's the
or
difference.
they were wrong and they made a mistake.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's a huge mistake, I would say.
Yeah, I mean that would be a colossal cock up.
Yeah, imagine that. And a lot of people are not prepared or are not willing to entertain such a possibility that I've been lied to in a massive scale. Because if you think of it, if you accept that the world is not round, that means the scientists have been lied to you. That means the NASA, the all of the space agency across the world lied to you. What does that mean? They are all connected. Doesn't matter if it is United States. Doesn't matter if it's Italy, China. They're all in it. They're all in it. What does that tell you? Everything you see on news, the conflicts between the countries, it's all smoke screen. Because if they can lie to you on this grand scale, they
Mm-hmm.
can lie to you on everything. What are you going to trust? What
Right.
are you going to trust? I'm not. A lot of people are not. Well, I'm prepared to accept all this, but a lot of people don't. This is what I think. This is what all boils down to, that people are not willing to accept that they've been lied to in such a grand scale.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I'm with you that I think the government and those people, they probably lie to us regularly. I mean, because they're just people, right? They're people that make
Yeah,
mistakes. But
the people in
I'm
power.
still, yeah,
They
certainly.
lie.
I mean, that's a huge part of this channel that I created is, watch out for people in power and charismatic leaders, and it's there's a lot of lies out there. But like for
Yeah.
me, I'm just looking around, and I mean, the technology that we have access to, I just see it as this is the result of science. Science is so good at what it does. It's so good at distinguishing reality and putting and making a language that reflects reality. And they make products and they can predict the future, and they can these are all signs to me that whatever thing that we've invented as humans called science, it tells us to the best of our knowledge what is true about the reality. And
Hmm.
I'm just not prepared to say that there's some giant lie out there
Conspiracy.
about the shape of the earth. I mean, I would accept there's lies about a lot of things. Like I think that the lie of like the consumption of Christmas and the consumption of just buying things that makes you happy, I think that's all a lie. I mean, we're told that all
Oh,
the time. The lie
oh,
of like the American dream, it's a lie. The lie of, there's a lot of lies out there. And
mhm.
but I don't think science. I think it's just to me it's just it's unfathomable that the thing that creates the bomb, the nuclear bomb, the cell phone. I mean, all these just horribly destructive things. It can't. It just seems untenable to me that it's lying about the shape of the Earth.
Yeah, I think I will end this by asking you this question. Do you think cell phones and the 27 dimension of the string theory are the same thing?
I mean that's a good question. I think that there's levels of it, right? I mean, like there's cell phones are pretty tangible, and the theory of radio waves and stuff has a lot of evidence. The theories of
Oh,
string theory has some evidence, but right? I mean, but not as much. We have to scale our confidence with the level of evidence.
well, yeah, that's my point. That's my point. You kept relating things that are tangible, that is really clearly demonstrable technology with something that only exists in the maps, only is a mathematical construct. You kind of keep relating the two together and call it science as a whole. And the purpose, like you said, the purpose of your creation of your channel is to watch out for the people who are lying to you. I think this is one of them. I think this is one of them because you relate science, okay, string theory is science, and then the cell phone is also science. Oh, I trust the cell phone, therefore I trust whatever the theoretical physicists put forth. That's the thing.
Yeah, I mean, but I would scale my confidence with the amount of evidence, right? I mean, there's some evidence for string theory. There's not. It's one of the theories out there that's making testable predictions, but it's not. I mean, it's just the beginning of it. I mean, I'm not going to put 100% or 99% confidence in it, but there's theories like gravity that you can put a lot of confidence in because they've been
Okay.
around and they're established and they're making testable novel predictions.
Okay. In terms of our globe or a heliocentric universe, Neil deGrasse Tyson says we only know about 4% of it. The rest 96% is unknown. So this is his word. This is his word. So in science, we are 96% stupid. What he's saying that is that, yeah, he
Yeah.
said that. He said that.
No,
And
I
kind of,
think he's probably right. I mean, he's definitely right.
yeah. So even in the current rhetoric, we know so little
Mm-hmm.
about the place we live in. 4% by
Yeah.
them. I don't know how did they come up with this number, but it's really small. But you put a lot of faith in it,
That I mean
just
that
like
that that yeah. That's a good
just like
way.
string,
Right.
yeah, just like string theory. You know, basically you know nothing about this 27th dimension
Yeah.
of it, but it's still called science. The reason why people believe in it because it's repeated so often, and then the world they live in is pushing this theory onto you, just
Right.
sticking in your throat. So it makes you think it is your belief, but it is not. It is some people put something into you
Right.
in your very very early age of your life,
Well, isn't
and
it
he does it
honest?
to everybody.
Isn't it honest just to say I put a 90% confidence in it because there's only so much proof of it because it's only making so many testable predictions. There's other theories besides string theory that are making some testable predictions, so we put a little bit of confidence in there. But, theories like gravity, there's no other theory of mass attracting mass that's making testable predictions that are coming true. So we can't that's the only theory out there that's working. So we can put a lot of confidence in it. We This is like the Matt Dillahunty thing, right? We proportion our confidence to the level of evidence, right? You don't put all your eggs in one basket. You just say, I have this much confidence in it because there's this much evidence.
Yes, this is you have you said there is only one theory out there which explains our reality
Well, not
so
no,
good.
not what's explaining it, but it's the only it's the theory of
Uh,
what's making mass attract mass, and they're making testable novel predictions, and they're coming true.
two things. First of all, mass doesn't attract mass, and there is no experiment to prove that. Not even the Cavendish. And the second thing is, you say there is only one theory, and that is because this is the only theory that every the government pushes. What happens with if the government suddenly got no bias? They push the flat Earth theory equally often than the globe theory. Well, all of a sudden, half of the world of people would think that the Earth is flat. And I live in Hong Kong. Right? I'm a Chinese. There is a saying in Chinese language. Is that it goes like this: a blind man, a blind man is touching an elephant. He never seen an elephant before. And then when he touches the elephant's tail, he declares that, "Whoa, this animal is a snake because it's got a narrow body." And then another blind man says, "No, no, no, it's not a snake," and he's touching a tusk of the elephant. Well, it's actually not an animal at all. It's a rock, because you see, tong tong
Mm,
tong,
it's hard.
it's hard. Yeah. So this is what we're doing right now. We're all
Yeah.
blind to the to
And
the
that
to the reality.
I've heard that story.
And then
It's great. There's another guy that's touching the side, and he says, "Oh, it's actually a wall because it's
yes,
wide and it's stiff, right?"
you got my point. And then in this analogy, um, let's say there is the chief of the blind man touches one thing. Let's say he touches the tail also. And say, okay, it is a snake. No more discussion. It no more discussion. It is a snake. I'm a chief. What I say goes. And then all the rest of the blind people say, oh, you're the chief. Okay, it's a snake. It's a snake.
Mhm.
This is rest of the world. For flat earthers, it is what that one guy, that one blind man who touches something else says, oh wait, hold on, wait a minute, you said it's a snake, but it is not what I found. And then the chief who say, you are going against me. You are anti anti-science. You're a science denier. What?
Mhm.
Well, it's been established. Well, my grandfather says it's a snake. I say it's a snake. My grandfather is a snake. It's a snake. So it has to be a snake. This is what happens in the world.
Yeah.
And we flat earthers, we are that one blind person who dares to ask questions.
Yeah. Well, don't you think that the scientists are doing that? They're asking questions and finding answers and making predictions too?
Like I said, you can make very good predictions with a certain model, but it doesn't make it true. You can
Well, no, it
well
doesn't
with
make it
the
true, but it makes
it,
it
it,
evidence, right?
like the analogy I gave, the scientists, there are also a community within science, right? There is a science community and an academic community. They too, they don't. You think they have the freedom to publish whatever they want, but in reality, like every groups in the society, they do not. They have the something called the peer pressure. That's what the peer review comes from. They have to agree with the others in order to get his paper published. You told me that you also watched the debates for evolution, right?
Oh yeah.
And then, yeah, in the academic field, there are loads of papers published pro evolution, but there is very few or even none published for creation.
Mhm.
The
Yeah.
reason is that they cannot get through the peer review. They cannot
Right.
get through the peer review section. Well, in this world, I would say a very large portion of people believed in creation. Am I not wrong?
No, I think you're right. I mean,
Yeah, a lot of people.
less and less though, I
uh,
think.
well, because the other side is being promoted more and more. That's the thing. Like, so, a lot of there are a lot of good scientists in the creation field, and then because I also looked at the evolution debates and the creation evolution debate side. So I know there are a lot of brilliant people. There are a lot of scientists who publishes paper on
Mhm.
on on behalf of the creation, and they never get through the peer review part. So
Mhm.
that's why they never get published.
Right.
And the same thing goes with every academic field, whether or not it is creation versus evolution, whether it's or not the other parts of the science. They have this peer pressure, and then doing research requires a lot of money and time, and guess what they get their funding from? The government.
Mhm.
So if your boss tells you that they have a certain bias, they have a certain
Mhm.
point of view, world of view they want to push, as the funder of your research, what kind of result will you produce?
Yeah.
This is the question you have to ask yourself.
No, I agree with you that money and corruption can come into it and plays a big part. Um,
Yeah.
I really like your example of the elephant thing, and this is kind of how I see it. Is like there's a bunch of blind people. They're trying to figure out what the elephant is, right? And
Yes.
there's a bunch of people that they're saying that Well, I think it's a snake, and this is what and it's consistent because it's round and it's this long and it's whatever, it feels scaly. So all of this
Mhm.
explains it. Well, the other guy is, well, it's actually a wall because it this explains it. It explains this. They're all just positing things that explain it. But then there's a guy
Mhm.
that says, well, I think it's this, and then I'm going to predict that if I do this, then this will happen. And if I can predict the
Mhm.
future and it comes true,
Mhm.
then that guy should be trusted more than the people who are just explaining it, right? Because we can explain it a million different ways. But
Well,
if
what
there's somebody that's predicting the future and it's coming true, shouldn't we believe that guy over the guys who can just explain it?
But what happens? There are two guys holding two opposing views, can make the same predictions, can make the same predictions of a certain things. Well, the analogy of an elephant is not exactly appropriate because there are very different on different parts of it when you touch it. What happens if is an animal is very similar, like a fox and a dog, like
Mm-hmm.
a fox and a dog. There are a lot of similarities between the two, and then you can make a lot of predictions. Even though you don't know what it is, you can make a lot of reasonable and correct predictions about that thing. Like, well, I think it's a fox. If my predictions are true, this animal has four legs. Well, voila, it has four legs. Therefore, it must be a fox. And then the other guy said, no, it's a dog. Well, if it is a dog, it also got four legs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it turns out that the
Well,
animal's got four legs.
I
So,
think in this
well,
case we'd go with the guy that made the prediction first.
in this case, people go with the guy who has more power, who has the
No,
bigger mouth.
no, you're right. You're probably right about that. I mean, and that's the thing that we got to look out for. But it's the world of blind people. We got to trust the guy that can make the testable predictions, not the guy who just can explain things.
Yeah,
So,
like I said, the flat Earth. Yeah, a lot of things. Well, do you know about the lunar eclipse? That the lunar eclipse, people say that, well, NASA predicts the lunar eclipse or to the down to the very second of it. So the heliocentric model must be true, right? Have you
I,
ever heard of
I
this?
haven't been following the thing, but I mean, it comes up a lot in the debates that the models can predict the time and the location
Yeah,
and stuff like that.
yeah. But what if I tell you that NASA doesn't use the heliocentric model to predict the lunar eclipse? It actually uses the method that the ancient Babylonian predicts eclipse. It's called the Saros cycle,
Mm-hmm.
Saros cycle. And in the web page of NASA, it even disclaims it. All the lunar eclipse predictions are made by one former NASA employee, just one. And then you click the link down below, and then it tells you how he's going to predict it. He uses the Saros cycle, and the
Right.
ancient Babylonians believed in the flat Earth.
Oh,
So, so my point is, you can make a lot of predictions, um, based on a model, and a lot of times it can be correct. It can be correct, but whether or not if it is the real case of it, when it boils down to the really is level, is up to debate. It's up for debate, and the reason why everybody thinks the Earth is a globe right now is because the powers that be pushes this paradigm to us constantly.
yeah.
That's my point.
Yeah. Um. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I really appreciate your time. It was really fun talking to you,
It's
and
very fun.
I appreciate your skepticism. And I'm glad that you could take the time to do this. And you keep
My
doing
pleasure.
what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, have a good
okay.
rest of your day. I know it's your Sunday, and you have a good day. And
Saturday for me. Saturday for me.
oh,
But
it's your
yeah,
Saturday.
okay.
Oh, okay. Okay. Wow. I thought it was my Saturday, but it's my Friday. Anyway, thanks, Fung. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Good to be here.
I'll see you next.
Thanks
I'm
for
sure
having
you'll have another debate, and I'll see you in the chat.
me. All right.
All right, see you,
All right.
Pong.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.